This one's a little exciting for me because I haven't done this one yet, which is kind of weird. And I just discovered another piece to the puzzle of this film, or this film series, I should say. And I finally got to sit down with it, and I wanted to do, the entry for it. But then I was like, let me just do the entry for the entire series. Now, for anybody who has not been exposed to this series, I regret the rock you were under, where you were left to not, learn of this film or of this unique concept that they decided to do. 10 years ago was the first film, I think 2011 or 2012. So, what is the ABCs of Death? Essentially, there's this production company with this producer that's backing it up that was looking for 26 directors. They sent 26 directors who wanted to be a part of this experiment in a way. They sent them a letter, and they gave each of these directors a letter and said, you have to choose a word with this letter, and you have to make a short horror film based on the word that starts with this letter. That's what the ABCs of Death is. And the first one is tremendous. There are so many crazy segments within this. For anybody who likes just the concept of short films, about how you can sort of scare somebody with that short bit of time, with really packing in a story with such a small amount of time. If you appreciate that, and they're all over YouTube. There's dozens of channels that do that stuff all over YouTube, and this is just what you do when you get to do that on a grand scheme. When you have a huge budget at your fingertips, you're able to do a film like this. There are so many segments that could be their own individual movie, and there are some that are just really not monumental. I'm trying to find the word for it, but okay. So, for example, in the first film, for the letter D, the word that the director used is dogfight, and what dogfight is, this little short they did, I think it's like 3 minutes long. Essentially, it's this underground fighting ring where they get sort of homeless looking people, and they have them fight against ravenous dogs, pit bulls or Labradors and stuff. So they have these trained dogs that are trained to be fighters, and they have them fighting these humans. And that's like the premise in a way. It's sort of very cinematic. There's no real dialogue. It's more the atmosphere and then the background music, to the point where you're watching everything happen and you don't really need dialogue to get what's going on. And then what happens is the dog overpowers the human. I know it sounds a little stupid, but it's what happens. And so the dog has its mouth wrapped around the human's throat. And then the human says, I believe it's a word the dog knows, or I believe it's the dog's name. And so the dog steps away, and then you see that the dog has a collar, and it's the name. It's the name of the dog. And then the two of them stand there, and they turn on the dog's then owner, because they realized, and they show a little flashback, that this dog actually belonged to this homeless dude, and this other guy kidnapped him to turn him into a fighting dog. And so they turn and they basically murder this other dude, which is a really sweet kind of storyline when you can only do that in 3 minutes, and you get all of that in 3 minutes. You literally get the beginning, a middle, and end with that story with no dialogue in that 3 minute period. And it's probably one of the top 5 segments of that entire first film. And they have tons of films that are like that also lead up to films that are there are some really bad ones. So like for F, you don't want it to be, but yes, for F, the director chose fart. And what he decided to do was he made it that there are, schoolgirls who fart, and their fart is a noxious gas that winds up killing everybody. And it's meant to sort of be a comedy horror thing. It's not one of the good ones on the whole list, but that's just to show you the dynamics of where these directors were kind of going for. Then it also goes to another one when you get to like Q. The directors shows Quack, and essentially what it is that if they kind of break the fourth wall, and they talk about how they have to do something with Q, and they're like, okay, they're gonna get a duck, and the word's gonna be Quack, and what they're gonna do is they're gonna kill the duck on camera. and they start prepping all this stuff to kill the duck, and they actually wind up killing themselves, and the duck lives. So that's one of those comedy ones as well. And it's, again, we're just talking about all of these different ideas that you can think of. Now, I'm not going to give you too many of them if you've never seen this, which, by the way, it's been 10 years, and they have 3 of these films. I don't know why you haven't seen it yet. So you should definitely go out and see it. If you haven't, find a way to watch it in some capacity, because they are totally worth it. This one's worth it. The second one's totally worth it. Then we get a little kind of, we kind of go a little off the rails. So after the sequel comes out, I think 2 or 3 years later, there's nothing but, the kind of looming questions of, are we going to get a third one? Because there's potential here to just keep going. You can just keep going. You just get more directors. You can double up on directors. Have them keep doing it, because I would love a franchise of this. But there were some issues when the second one came out. They were kind of having a problem, with money being a big scenario. It didn't make as much money. And even though it was kind of video on demand, the video on demand kind of led to the copies being pirated. And because the copies were pirated, they lost money. So because production lost money, they are kind of, the third film is kind of in the loop. It's out there. We don't know what's going to happen with it. However, I want to say 5 years ago, right? What's 2023? 7 years ago, there's a film that comes out called The ABCs of Death 2.5. This is what kind of got me back into it, because I thought I had seen all of the ABCs of Death things, and then I got this one that popped up on my radar, and I was kind of like, where did this come from? How come I didn't hear about this one? So I didn't see this one until just recently. So now what it is that it's not part 3. It's just, apparently this kind of opened the door to what the actual sort of pre-production stuff was. And what it was they give like hundreds of directors letters, and they obviously pick and choose the one they like the most to go into the film, but they still have the other ones that are kind of sitting there. And what 2.5 is all of the letter M's, I guess, they had sitting around. So it's just a film of the M words. That's it. Now, that does leave a lot of openings. You could essentially do a series. Do a whole nother film of where it's just A's. Do a whole nother film where it's just O's. But I'll be honest, all the M's aren't that good. Like, I can see why this kind of like went under my radar, probably went under a lot of people's radars who are fans of the first 2 films, and probably is another nail in the coffin to how we won't get any more of the ABCs of Death series, because they're just not that good. And if the premise is that they just keep getting submissions and they only pick and choose the ones they like really want, that's understandable, because if they're only picking the ones they want or the ones that are the best, these ones are definitely not the best. There's a couple that are good, but not enough for the whole film to sort of be worth it. It's really disappointing to have watched this as the kind of last bit of ABCs of Death that was put out there, that I was able to find, that is sort of available to the rest of the world. Because if they still have all the other letters, I say just release them. What do you got to lose? But I guess maybe because M isn't good. M is not good, and I'm sorry. This 2.5 one is just not. It doesn't live up to what the first 2 kind of set in stone. You know what I'm saying? It's just really disappointing to see that it came to this, that you're not going to have any more because of the lack of funds and the lack of money, that you decided to just push this one out to see if people were still interested. But this is not something that people are going to be interested. Like, I can't recommend this one to anybody. However, I still highly recommend the first 2. You should totally find those first 2, watch them wherever you can, Tubi, Amazon, whatever it's on. Watch ABCs of Death Part 1 and 2. It's just very entertaining, and it's just a very exciting concept that you can watch and kind of sit there and see that, like, even when people experiment, even when production companies decide that they want to take the chance and experiment on something, this is good. This is a good experiment that could still be worth reviving if they gave it a chance. I don't know if they're gonna, but it's still worth it to me now.